now. We chose this title in response to the COVID pandemic, not just because of the pandemic, but to also ask each guest what their thoughts of the future of architecture or their specialized area is. We really wanted to get a wide variety of different thoughts of, where the future is and what's happening now. So yeah, we asked each guest to come up with their own variation of the title. So Tara's is The Future is Sustainable. Yeah, I'll let Tara introduce herself. So yeah, Tara.
Thank you so much for having me. I just want to say, yeah, thank you. It's a real honor to be here this evening. Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to present to you all. I'm now just going to share my screen and I'll give you a little bit of a fuller picture of who we are as a practice. I am going to hopefully hear someone say that my screen is visible in a moment. Can you see my screen?
Just give it 1 second. I think it's loading.
Okay, cool. Weirdly, I can't see you, so I think you have to say when.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't see it. Darren, can you see it?
No, I can't, no.
Okay, no worries. We'll try that again. Right.
That's good. That's looking good, Tara. Yeah, perfect.
Amazing. Brilliant. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity actually to title this. And for me and for our practice, I think very much is the future is sustainable. And we chose sustainability because that's what we specialize in as a practice, but also in response to the pandemic. And hopefully as we go along, I'll expand on what we define sustainability as and how we look to bring that into practice. I wanted to highlight from the beginning that as a practice, we're quite propositional. So a lot of our projects are very much either self-started or where a client has come to us. We've expanded the brief quite significantly, and I'll try to demonstrate that all the way through the projects that I expand on today. Today, I've chosen 3 different types of projects as well, just to see the different types of scales we work on. And throughout the presentation, I do have a few questions that I've put in some of the slides, just so you can start to think about them, ponder on these questions. And at the end, obviously, I'm happy to take any questions you have, but it would be great to get your thoughts on the questions within this. So we're a small team and we're based in Lambeth, in Waterloo, obviously virtually at the moment. We haven't seen each other directly for almost a year, which is intense. But the practice has been co-founded by myself and my partner, Lanray. And we started it about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, and it's been a heck of a journey. So I'm very much happy to answer any questions on sort of practice life as well. It's run, or we're sort of supported by an incredible team, an architect, studio manager, and architectural assistant. As a practice, we were from the beginning quite intent on setting quite a strong vision for the practice and how we were going to develop. And that was based around an ethos that we developed. And the principle here, particularly as a practice and as someone who originally graduated through a recession, it was very important for us to look at ensuring that whenever we were going to start a practice, that we diversified the types of projects we worked on and significantly the types of practices we worked on, but also holding the key values of who we are as a practice, which means that they become timeless over the years. So as a practice, we focus on 5 main areas, being design-led, of course. So really looking at context and being contextually driven in any schemes we do. Being community-centered, so we very much have a strong community engagement thread that runs through our schemes, whether that be the clients who might be public sector or private sector, or whether that be the end user. So it might be a private client who's developing some homes for some end users, and we try to be as in contact with the end user as possible. So that's community centered. We try to be innovative, not just in the product, i.e. the homes, a lot of the homes that we provide, or our community centers. We sort of specialize in that in terms of homes and community centers, but also in the process. So as a standard, we use BIM software within the practice, and everything is done in this environment. And we try to choose our consultants based on the fact on how they work as well, to ensure that we have quite a smooth communication process, because all of that matters as you get down the process. And then finally, sustainable as a practice. When we speak about sustainability, we very much look at environmental sustainability as well as socioeconomic sustainability. And for us, environmental looks at not just the building, but very much about the places and the placemaking around the building. So green infrastructure, and what's that doing? How is it contributing towards helping air pollution, for example? Under socioeconomic sustainability, we really look at aspects such as health and well-being and community voice, ensuring that people in a space feel like their voice is heard and feel like they're being listened to, and giving them an opportunity to co-create and co-design. A little bit about what we do. As I highlighted, we work with a lot of private sector clients as well as public sector. When it comes to public sector, we work with local authorities, which can be that's they're working with Croydon Council, Purley High Street, and we worked in collaboration with another practice, Urban Symbiotics, or they could be housing associations. This was Flagship Group, who actually usually do homes, but they happen to have a student scheme, and they were looking for a student pavilion, and so that we were quite excited for a type of scheme like that. We also, that's Lancaster West Estate. We work in collaboration, and so we're working in collaboration with KCA Architects. So that's Grenfell Tower, just in the middle there, and then the three fingers that come out of Grenfell Towers of Lowrise Towers. So we're looking at the refurbishment, working with the residents on refurbishing that and redeveloping that. But also we work on a lot of sustainability-led schemes, and we are always looking to meet targets such as the RIBA 2030 or guidance from the LETI guidance or passive house schemes. Additionally, we look at guidance. We either, and this is what I mean by propositional, we create guidance. So we created a little while ago the client's guide to sustainable development, which was hugely downloaded and popular. Same with a client's guide to modern methods of construction. So we do a lot of guidance work for the industry, but also, or to contribute to the industry, but also for authorities as well. And I'll expand on that. So the first project I'm going to look at is the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town. And what this is we looked at creating, I work within the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town, which is a partnership of 5 authorities, including Epping Forest, East Herts, leaving me now, Harlow, of course, District Council, Essex, and Hertfordshire County Councils. So 5 partner authorities who are bringing forth a garden town. It was given garden town status a couple of years ago by MHCLG, and we created a sustainability guidance and checklist. What this is a guidance that means that every incoming developments within the garden town will have to go through this checklist in order to ensure that they meet quite high sustainability standards. Within the guidance, we very much expanded the brief. Originally, the brief was for an environmental sustainability checklist, and we looked to expand that and look at socioeconomic sustainability as well. To do this, we employed using a bit of a RAG rating that really helped developers and developments, as well as officers, local authority officers, identify sort of where a development sat in terms of what we felt was good, high quality. So it was all in relation to the context of meeting being net zero carbon by 2030, mainly because the garden town and the authorities within the garden town had declared a climate emergency. So for a bit of context as well, that's Harlow, sitting in the middle, Harlow District Centre. We've got 4 main strategic sites, if you like, around Harlow, with a lot of redevelopment going on within Harlow as well. Over the next about 20 years, we're expecting between 16 and 20,000 new homes and associated amenities to come through the garden town. For context as well, we felt it was important to identify what the problem was. And here we're looking at scope 1 emissions, in effect, how much carbon we're emitting in terms of the districts at the moment. The sort of dark orange and lighter orange looks at is mainly residential buildings, residential and commercial buildings, whereas the dark blue, which is the other largest contributor, particularly in Epping Forest, this is road and rail, but mainly road traffic. And so we were really ensuring that this sustainability guidance focused on residential developments, but also sustainable movement through different areas in the garden town. As highlighted, we looked at environmental and socioeconomic sustainability. Under environmental, we had quite a few themes, and that's the same with socioeconomic. Very quickly, they run through sort of energy efficiency. So of how energy efficient are we making our buildings? Are we meeting passive house standards, for example, versus building regulation standards? We looked at waste. What innovative ways can we use to remove waste from within new developments in the garden town? We also looked at a sustainable transport. So really encouraging active movement, active travel throughout the garden town, with an ambition for a 60% modal shift. So walking, cycling, and using shared transport and public transport within the garden town. Under socioeconomic, we looked at health and well-being, incorporating things like aspects such as allotments within new developments to ensure that schemes was to ensure that people had quick access to sort of fresh food next to them, but also really looking at businesses and how we could help them. What this meant is that we did a lot of engagement, and we engaged a lot of these types of people, local businesses, residents groups, in developing the guidance as well. So it's something that's quite integrated with the local communities. What that translates to is a few spreads. I won't go through this in detail, but a few spreads that have a typical layout, which is like this. We in effect highlight the sort of objectives we want. For example, this is the ambition to meet net zero carbon by 2030, the local key policy. We highlight case studies, and they're all interactive. There's an interactive guide, and each developer can basically mark themselves on how well they believe they're doing. And it's obviously an opportunity for us to ensure that we're pushing them towards the green. So that matters for the environmental section, and the tabs at the bottom, you can see highlight the different aspects, and the socioeconomic sustainability section as well. So here's one question for you guys to think about. It's who creates place, the thought about who creates place. How can we make the creation of place more equitable? The second project I'm going to highlight is Hermitage Muse. It's a scheme that is just coming on site in London, in Crystal Palace. And this is a nice small scheme. It's 8 units, and it ranges from semi-detached terrace, and this is the terrace you can see. And in the far corner, which you can't see hugely, is a semi-detached, so detached in this house, terraces, and semi-detached on the end. This was a site brought to us from our client who had purchased the site post-planning, and we were looking to develop the technical design, but critically, we went through a redesign process, as well as, and this is a positional side again, as well as ensuring that we were being quite ambitious when it came to the quality of homes. So originally, these didn't necessarily have any standards beyond building regulations on it, and we challenged the client to looking at developing these in line with the RIBA 2030 goals and ambitions. So the client, fair play to them, took that opportunity and took that challenge on, and now we're working towards meeting the RIBA 2030 challenge. What that involved, that just shows, that's the main, that's the site there in the middle that we can see. There's the main road towards the north of the page, and sort of our boundary towards the south of the page. What we ended up doing was working quite closely with a client, particularly in the beginning stages, to go through an education process, to be honest, mainly because they had not delivered a scheme meeting the RIBA 2030 climate challenge targets before. And so we spent quite a lot of time in the initial stages just working with them to design what that looked like, what it would mean to them. The main challenges for us, or us as a design team and the client, was about meeting operational energy targets, as well as embodied carbon targets, and trying to lower this as much as possible. For context, we're looking to meet operational energy, as you can see, just highlighted slightly in the green there, of below 35 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum, whereas current building regulations is about 146. So this is a significant difference, which means we're going to have to work quite hard with the project, and really looking at adopting a fabric first approach. So really high insulation for our walls, our floors, our roofs, to ensure that happens. The second challenge, of course, is embodied carbon and reducing that as much as possible. What that meant for us was, again, what that meant for us really, actually, I'll go back one, was looking at materiality and how the materials could affect the embodied carbon. There's another screen, another sheet that I'll expand on that with. This just gives a bit of a sketch, and this is sort of the process we went through with our clients to identify what the targets were. We were meeting for operational energy anyway, so U values such as 0.10, whereas current building regulations sort of range and sits around 0.18, 0.115. We're really lucky. So it's a significant upgrade. Same with embodied carbon. We went through, there we go. We went through a strategy, I'll expand in the other page, of identifying what the best materials were for this. It's masonry, brickwork, and that's what we saw, and that's what we inherited in terms of post-planning or from planning. And what we really wanted to do with this was, even though we inherited something that had quite a lot of masonry in it, could we perhaps look at mixing structures and mixing material to ensure that we reduced our embodied carbon. Additional strategies looked at ensuring that 80% of the materials are either reused or reusable. And here we were looking to use reusable brickwork for parts of the buildings, but also using materials such as lime mortar to ensure that post the life of this particular scheme, all the bricks could be easily removed and then reusable for a new life, for next life. But also we wanted to ensure that we were specifying materials that we could get quite local to the site. And so we're looking for a radius of about 50 miles. And then I'll move to this, which really just expands a little bit more on the materials that we were looking at. So mainly brick, because that was the main material. But here we were looking at either adopting block work alongside that, particularly maybe for the party walls and the inner skin of our external facade, or looking at timber, for example. And what eventually won out was a hybrid of brickwork on the external and masonry actually on the external, using blockwork as well, but quite highly insulated blockwork, so sort of aircrete, and internally and for party walls, other structures we're using timber. So that looked like a timber frame, but also glulam beams in replacement of steel. But we were able to demonstrate that there's a significant reduction in embodied carbon if we went through this process with the clients, and they were happy to adopt that. I think it's important to note at this stage why that was even a discussion for the client. So post Grenfell, a lot of developers understandably are nervous about the materials we use, and specifically timber, of course. And so even though this is quite a low rise scheme, it's only 3 stories and 2 stories in areas. This is these are some of the challenges we're coming up in the current market, ensuring that schemes are mortgageable, or as mortgageable as possible, because we need to de-risk the process and de-risk the challenges for our clients. And so in this particular question, I wanted to ask you guys, in a post-COVID world, how can homes and places respond to new and sustainable ways of living and working, but also how might practitioners adapt and respond to our climate and ecological emergencies? So even where we have constraints with planning already achieved, how can we improve that to ensure that we are responsibly responding to the climate and ecological emergencies? And then the final one I want to speak on is a different type of project. It's an app that I created with my co-partner, with my co-director, and it's called, initially it was called the My Part 3 app. And we created this a few years ago, post Part 3, having worked in practice for a few years. And it was just an app that would look to run a project, run a practice, or give students information, or Part 3 students information on running a project, running a practice, and also like some key resources that we use. So access to the building regulations, industry events, local journals, podcasts. And so after we created this, and actually part of the creation process was we, even though we were working full time, we decided that we were going to create an app and ourselves, so learn how to code. So we'd go to work during the day and come back in the evening and start coding, which, as you can imagine, was quite a challenge. And after going through a heck of a lot of that process, we decided, we had sense knocked into us, and we decided to bring an app developer on board to work with us. But it meant that the first app creation we did was on iOS, because we both had Macs, and that was how we were creating it at the time. And there wasn't the cross-platform networks that work so well these days. I'm going to share a wee video with you now, and I'll expand more on the process of the app. Hopefully you can hear that okay.
It really is fantastic to see so many of you here today. A very warm welcome to HOK's London studio. We're absolutely thrilled to be collaborating with Archiboo to host the Architect Pitch. This evening we will hear from 7 practices, all competing as part of the Architect Pitch, inspiring you and our judges. We will hear their amazing ideas.
Right, good evening everyone. Our idea stems from 20 years of research.
Good evening. My co-creator and I decided to create the My Part 3 app.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Nick and I'm here to tell you about UBuild, a flat pack self-build system.
Meanwhile Habit looks at occupying London's vast commercial buildings for use as habitable, self-supporting housing for the homeless.
Brightbox is a working prototype for a community hub.
Hello, my name's Tom Howard and this is Thomas Miller. We're architects based in the West Country and we're here to tell you about our housing startup, Lived In.
You all know us as Carl Turner Architects, but that didn't quite cover it. We've actually turned the entire practice into a startup.
The ability to share ideas and communicate with one another will remain prevalent no matter what happens, no matter where we go. And it is something that makes London one of the greatest cities in the world.
The people we've chosen to win are Gbolade Design Studio with My Part 3 app.
Awesome. So we showed that to say that after winning that, one of the prizes was really looking at, just make sure, yeah, okay, fine. One of the prizes was making sure that we really explored how we could take the app further. And so what we did beyond that was redevelop the app, or develop the app to be called now the Architects app, which does a lot of the same things, but what it does include this time is a sustainability tab within the app, which really looks at showcasing the best case studies in sustainable design, energy efficiency, renewable energy standards, and renewable energy guidance, sustainable transport, a lot of the research we've been doing over the years. We felt like post declaring a climate emergency, in terms of joining Architects Declare, we wanted to play our part in this, in contributing to our industry. You can download the app obviously on the website, which is available on both iOS as well as Android now, because we had an app developer who can do that. And here, the question I want to really focus on is innovation. And looking in this digital age, what ideas are you most excited about creating to change how we work with and serve society? So thank you very much. That was quick. I think I want to just maybe use the last, I'm going to exit this. There we go. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, hopefully. Yeah. I just want to use the last couple of seconds, maybe just explaining a little bit about who we are as a practice in terms of the projects we've just I've just gone through. Really kind of shows, I guess, our ambition in terms of being quite flexible in what we define architecture as and what we define the role of architects as. And so it's something that really runs through everyone within the practice. And it'll be great to have, any questions that you might have or any thoughts you want to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tara. Alex, do you want to take over?
Yes, if people would like to start their questions now, you can write them in the chat. I have some questions on myself to start off.
Yeah.
So obviously now in the world with COVID and everyone keeping social distancing, how do you think this is going to affect your community buildings and the way you design community buildings?
It's a good question. I mean, what we've tended to do is adapt like the rest of the world, in effect. And even though even with our community buildings, but also the same actually with our residential buildings, it's more the process of engaging with people, with engaging with homeowners. And so we've had to move everything online quite quickly, and everyone's been really understanding with that. We've spent a lot more time sort of reaching out to different groups of people who we'd work with. So for example, with the Harlem Gilson Garden Town strategic master planning work we did there, we actively reached out to business owners who couldn't come to, say, a local authority hall, which is previously how it would be done. We actively reached out to residents groups. We actively reached out to different parts of the community, different networks, charities, to ask them to really be involved in workshops, like sort of online workshops similar to this. But critically, within sections like this, we were quite intentional in coming into smaller breakout rooms so that we could have sort of slightly more intimate, open and honest conversations with people. So where they felt perhaps a fear about new development, or really not understanding what new development or redevelopment of existing schemes look like, we were able to sort of answer as best we could those questions. But we've been very intentional, if you like, in reaching out. So I think that's just going to be more and more part of the role of the architect as we move forward.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a question. Could you tell us a bit more about the challenges during manufacturing process in the Rebirth Stage 5?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. It's the questions are coming in good and fast now. I think there are a little bit more about the challenges during RIB stage. So this is on site. At the moment, we've had, particularly at the beginning of COVID, we had quite a few projects go on hold because we're in a pandemic. So we had quite a few projects go on hold. But I think the interesting thing about us as a practice is, and that's why I mentioned maybe at the beginning, that a variety of client base, looking at public and private sector clients. So when the private sector clients went a little quieter, public sector work really picked up. So it meant that we were relatively balanced in the amount of work we were doing. On site at the moment, we're just about to start again on site with the Hermitage Muse, with the Croydon Crystal Palace scheme that I showed. And the client is quite keen to ensure that we maintain social distancing. We have our masks on. We are going to be doing a range of meetings between being on site in terms of design team meetings, being on site as well as virtually as well, to ensure that there are limited number of people on site whenever possible. So I think it's just taking a lot of the precautions that we I guess that we ordinarily wouldn't do, but being more serious about that in a situation like this.
Thank you very much. This is a similar question to what I had also. How hard do you find it to influence clients to go down the more sustainable route in designing, in asking to design a house?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because I think this is where a strong ethos really plays out. Having worked in practices previously, I think when we started our practice, we were quite keen to set out the stall for who we were and the types of projects we wanted to work on. And sustainability was a key theme in that. So actually, we find that a lot of the clients who come to us are already that way minded. And even if they're not that way minded, they're quite open to being persuaded in that direction. I think we've spent a lot of time sort of refining how we communicate with our clients, particularly where we're working with both public sector and private sector. The public sector is slightly easier at the moment because most local authorities have declared a climate emergency, so they have a responsibility in effect to respond in that way. With our private client sector clients, what we tend to do is work with is speak to them about the commercial advantage and the commercial value of having a more sustainable development. What we're saying to them is that, hey, you're future-proofing that your scheme right now. When your scheme is completed at the end of 2021, 2022, you'll be ahead of the market, and more people. We know from research that more and more people and homeowners are looking for more sustainable homes to live in. And so for your benefit in terms of marketability, this works on your behalf. And so we're having those types of conversations, which I think have been that so far have gone down well. But because we have quite a strong ethos, it helps the types of clients who come to us in the first place.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. This is a good one. So you mentioned earlier in your presentation that you go above and beyond the REBA building standards and sustainability. Do you have any thoughts on the current standards right now, and whether it kind of like individual firms have to make their own that are higher?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yes, so building regulation standards. I mean, we recently, the industry recently went through consultation for how we can increase and improve, particularly Part L, where we're talking about operational energy and a fabric first approach. And currently building regulation standards are just not cutting it. And we know that as an industry. And so that's why the industry fought back quite hard, actually, with the recent government consultation, the Future Home Standards. And that's been revised accordingly to a degree, and that there will be more revisions coming in. So for now, we know that we can't really afford to, it's really difficult to design poorly when you know better. And so we can't really afford to design to current building regulation standards when we know that they're far more stringent sustainability standards, because we know at the end of the day, it's the end user who benefits from it. And we have a responsibility to that end user in ensuring our schemes work best for them. So, yeah.
Thank you. How do you approach and adapt the lessons learned from facilities managers and end users for promoting sustainability in future designs?
Gosh, this is a really good question. Goodness. So how do we approach and adapt? Sorry, what was the
lessons learned?
The lessons learned from facilities managers and end users for promoting sustainability in future designs. Very good. Okay, so one of the ways in which we work is by BIM primarily. We work with our clients and we speak to our clients specifically about using BIM in its fullest sense. We haven't actually yet worked with facilities managers who've used our BIM models in its entirety in terms of when it comes to replacing particular elements, but we're very open about sharing that. And certainly with our clients, we share through the design process, through the construction process, but in terms of facilities management, that hasn't yet happened. But certainly with our end users, one thing we really enjoy is the co-creation aspect, the co-design aspect, and that's why we try to bring them along with us, because one of the things that we are looking to do more of is post-occupancy evaluations in buildings, in our buildings that we design, to ensure that we can learn from these and adapt to future design. But this is also why we feel like engaging the end user all the way through is as critical a point.
Yeah.
And I think I just touched on the next question, which was about POE.
Yeah.
All right.
So I guess.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's important to be done.
So how do you decide the projects based
on their sustainability? So
yeah.
Projects are more sustainable. Sorry, some projects just aren't sustainable in general. that this is a much wider conversation, and you've hit on something that in the industry we're certainly discussing, and I'm going to sort of sidestep that question a little bit, because I know it is quite hairy, particularly with maybe large infrastructure projects. With homes, we know we can do better right now, and I think it's easier to do better. I think it's important to recognize that there is a transition period, and we have to be realistic with that transition period. And I think as a practice, we try to do the same. And that's why it's important the types of clients we work with, but also recognizing that we're not going to, like the rest of the industry, we're not going to get every single project right from now in terms of sustainability. And in a few years, the new technology, new innovations come out. And so there'll be different ways of doing things. So I think we need to allow ourselves the grace period in this moment to be able to adapt as technology adapts and as innovation comes through, and as we all become better educated about sustainable schemes.
Thank you. Would Oreo Lua like to speak, because you have your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. No, hi Tara. I was going to ask about because the video you showed, I think you were actually featured in it. Like it was a networking event. So I was just wondering, like, how that kind of went. Like, was it for like promoting your practice, or was it for I don't know, like getting to know other people in the industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. So I think I'll answer that specific question, and then slightly more general on networking. So within that was the Archibald Awards, and that was not last year, the year before. I'm going to say, I hope. I think it was the year before. And they put out an open call for architects and designers across the country, I believe. Yeah, definitely across the country, to pitch ideas, and we'd have to give in effect a 3-minute pitch of whatever our idea was. And so we went through a shortlisting process. Lots of practices applied, and we were whittled down to 7 of us who got to present on the night. So we pitched obviously the Part 3 app at the time, and we were lucky enough to win that. I think for us, we find that networking is quite an important aspect in our industry, and something that I don't do very well. I could be better at, and I think many of us could probably be better at. But I think with practice, it becomes much easier. And personally, I had to go through a lot of hurdles to get over myself to go out and network. And so I try to make a point of networking wherever I have the opportunity. Obviously, more difficult these days, but hopefully when we're back to meeting people.
Oh, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to what extent are the challenges the industry faces regarding sustainability and the politics of sustainability? And what do you think needs to change in governmental policy?
Wow.
Challenging question.
Who is asking these questions? There's a lot in there, and I feel like one of my earlier questions, specifically with building regulations, and starts to answer that. But what I do think would be really important within government is actually where we're thinking about, inherently sustainability needs to be thought about and embedded right at the beginning of schemes. And I don't mean sustainability in just environmental, but socioeconomic, i.e. engaging with community and health and well-being, etc. Because, orientation, fabric first approach, all of that needs to be brought to the front. And often what we find is that design is really focused on in feasibility and planning stage, and then somehow technically it's supposed to work. And I think that's why we see a lot of disconnect between planning schemes, planning design, and actually technically how it ends up working. And you can tell that whoever worked on it at a planning stage does not have a technical mind, or has not considered particular aspects. So I think, I personally feel like that's why it's important that the sustainability and the and policy on the planning side is strengthened when it comes to the requirements of sustainability. There are many arguments at the moment, understandably, for particular parts of the industry who want to leave sustainability and technical design to stage 4. Whereas I strongly believe that needs to be brought in more strongly into from stage 1. And so things like the RIBA sustainability overlay should be used more strongly, actually.
Thank you very much. So, do you think that digital manufacturing and more off-site construction will help to achieve quickly the SDGs?
Yeah, I do, and for I'm sure everybody knows what sustainable. I was going to say design goals, but I think that's. I think absolutely. I think offsites MMC has a real opportunity here. I think it's something though that has been in the industry for decades already. So it's not new. It's just about how quickly and how much we're able to adapt to adopting offsite construction and design for manufacture and assembly opportunities. So I do think that, yes, there's definitely a strong place for that. I think there are opportunities that lay in not just DFMA and MMC, but also generative design, being part of that process, being able to identify from the outset whether volumetric or panelized system might be incorporated in these systems. It makes it for a far more streamlined process. And actually, a lot of architects tend to be scared of sort of generative design, whereas I think there's a real opportunity really for architects and specifically to take back their agency with that aspect of digitizing and perhaps incorporating MMC far more efficiently.
Thank you. So, do you think the facilities managers could play a vital role in sustainability if they're involved with the design team and planning of design to meet clients' needs and avoid potential maintenance issues?
Absolutely. You know, the short answer is absolutely yes. I mean, one of the in a slightly different way, certainly with the guidance we created for the Harlow and Gilson Garden Town, the advantage there was that we worked really closely with planning officers, which is usually at the beginning of the process anyway. But as importantly, we worked with building regulations officers who are usually at the latter stages of the process, but also community engagement officers, and being able to hear from the beginning of your process, being able to hear what the main challenges are usually at the end of the process means absolutely we can incorporate and redesign and respond to the challenges on the ground. And this is why I think you know, the common theme or the common thread of engagement and who we're engaging with is incredibly critical. So yes.
Thank you very much. So I have a question too myself from your work in Harlow
and Gilson Garden Town.
Yeah, the Garden Town. It's more from experience. The local town for me was also named a Garden Town, but it has also recently been named one of the ugliest and worst places to live in the UK.
Wait, where is that? I'm curious. I dare not ask. Where is it?
Well, it's Didcot.
Okay.
So I was just wondering, so what have you done to make sure that your plans and all that have been successful in Harlow?
It's a good question. So at the moment, we can't say whether it's been successful or not. We've just created it. However, it's I feel like it's not a cop out. I just genuinely really strongly believe that the more you involve people, different types of people throughout the process, the richer a response is going to be. So for example, I certainly grew up in Welwyn Garden City, or part of my life anyway in Welwyn Garden City, and you know, I loved it, and it was brilliant. It was green. We could walk everywhere. Could walk to town, which was half an hour away, but it didn't feel like it because it was so varied. And I think having a really strong planning process that allows people to be involved, that allows us to ensure that green infrastructure is embedded in new developments. Like I say, not just, yes, of course, for health and well-being in terms of what makes a place beautiful, for example, but also for the health benefits that we get in terms of air pollution. So really, I think that that garden towns, garden cities, but actually just good places, actually, is an overlaying and it's a layering of so many different themes and ingredients, and ensuring that all these voices are heard. And I think that's the only way we can ensure places are successful, ensuring that people are able to walk close by. People are either with or without or against the sort of 15-minute city, but we're able to walk walk to work, or walk to the closest shops, or walk to the train station that might take us into the city, or cycle to the train station that might take us into the city. It doesn't matter. It just gives us an opportunity to meet people. It gives us an opportunity to engage in our local community. So I do think it's a layering of all these themes and aspects of good design that already exists. Many of these aren't sort of new ideas. A lot of really good design options already exist.
Thank you very much. This is interesting. So in terms of sustainability, what do you think the role of redefining what luxury means in architecture, and culturally? So I mean the use of exotic woods and using local timber instead, and those types of things, so redefining what the term luxury means.
Yeah, I think this I think comes back to actually to the agency of the architect. I think that we have to sell a good story on actually what matters, and actually what the world is changing. As we've never been in a place in society where everybody is far more on board with sustainable development, with Extinction Rebellion did such a great job in terms of raising this to the general public awareness. So I think that actually what is more sought after these days, even in the clothes we buy and where we order our food from, is that aspect of sustainability and not using things just once. So I think it's actually more in our consciousness than it's ever been, which means that I feel like there's a greater opportunity to be able to speak to our clients about what matters, not necessarily what's luxury. And we'll always have that. Let's not fool ourselves to thinking that, we will always have that. That's just life. And, that's just variety. That's just life. But I think it's about narrating what's important, rather than, the I don't want to say superficial, but to degrade the superficial. I think it's about communicating what's important, and then you're able to, specify your local grown wood.
Thank you. So, do you believe that practices are reacting fast enough to meet the Rebus sustainability targets for the country as a whole?
Oof, gosh, this is a question. I have to say yes, right? I think that more can be done, and I think that's maybe why I spoke about the grace period. I think there's a significant amount of upskilling that has to happen for architects, for clients, for PMs, for the general public. So I think to a degree, we're in this together, but I think this is where architects can take their agency back in actually being the ones who really strongly respond and drive what we believe the future looks like, being the ones who champions it within the team, knowing the clients being having to think twice about making decisions because they know they'll upset the architect if it was a non-sustainable decision, and we've had that. And it's great when we're able to communicate a message so strongly that the client is able to communicate that to their investor without needing the architect to be there, without needing the design team to be there. So whether architects or practices are reacting fast enough, yeah, I think we need to allow a grace period, and I think there's significant upskilling to be done in the industry, but across the industry as well.
Thank you. I mean, yeah. I mean, being a first-year student, architecture, sustainability and climate change is definitely always in the back of my mind. So that's very important.
Yeah, yeah.
So I see we've run out of questions. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to just write them or even put up your hand. Yep, we have Christopher. Would you like to speak?
Hi, I couldn't type it quick enough. I was just going to ask, do you think there should be more incentives given possibly for choosing sustainability? And if so, then who do you think we should be incentivizing? Like the architects, the manufacturers, or like the clients themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that when we want real structural change to happen, it's important to recognize that there's so many levers that allow for change, and it's never going to be just one. So I think to your question, we are going to have to be incentivizing everyone. We're going to be incentivizing the society with tax breaks. We're going to be incentivizing, we're doing, we've just purchased a home and we're doing a retrofit and the Green Deal is available. We're going to have to incentivize the general public. We're going to have to incentivize the architects, but this is why I come back to, I think architects have a real opportunity to actually take back agency. So I think there's so many levels, because some developers, for example, will jump on the process because they recognize, if for nothing else, I'm sure they're good companies, but if for nothing else, this is a brilliant PR opportunity. But there's some others who actually just need policy. They, you know, that there has to be the carrot and the stick, if you like, and those have to be used across the industry, across all parties involved. So I think it's always recognizing that policy and strong baseline is important, which is why we have to lobby governments to raise the baseline, but also be aspirational as well. It's a good question, though.
Yep. So with the sustainability and climate goals updating, changing every time, yeah, they do change frequently. How can we really make sure that the buildings that are being designed are really future-proofed in the long term?
Yeah, it's really good. That's a really good question, and I think with changes that come out, we can only do the best to the ability in terms of what's available. We can only do the best to that. I think but I think it's important also to recognize that the fundamentals are simple and the fundamentals are there. We can have technology, absolutely, but the fundamentals of a fabric first approach and reducing operational energy is there. The fundamentals of having low embodied carbon for homes and buildings and places is there. Those are fundamentals. The fundamentals of good daylighting is there. The fundamentals of thinking about overheating is there. There's some fundamentals that we already have and we can use. And when they change in the future, I think the greatest opportunity for anyone in life, but certainly for architects, is the ability to adapt and to constantly be changing, constantly be adapting, recognizing that our thinking will change and that we work in a far broader environment than we ever have in history. So yeah, with things changing as they are, I think it's remembering the fundamentals, having those as the bedrock, and then moving on from there.
Thank you. Christopher, do you still have a question because you have your hand up, or is it just there still? Okay. So it'll be interesting to hear about how you embed sustainability in the day-to-day running of your practice, and how you could how it could be set as an example to other younger architects and other practices.
Certainly, I'll start with the easy one first in terms of setting an example to clients. I think, you know, we try to make it quite obvious from our window shop, and our window shop is our website and our social media. And we try to be quite clear on who we are, what we stand for, so clients expect it. But certainly in our very first conversation, we are very much about, you know, how do we ensure that this home, if it's a domestic scheme, how do we ensure that it's future-proof for you and your children and your children's children? And we try to help clients think in legacy terms rather than just now or just for the next 5 years. And even if it's just a commercial scheme, well, how do you ensure that you don't have to refurbish and upgrade this significantly in 5 years from now or in 10 years from now? And so we try to be quite, we try to think really quite long term when we speak with our clients. So in terms of day-to-day, all our schemes, I really can't think of one where we're not trying to meet a sustainable goal, or where we're not significantly, by default, we design better than the baseline. So it's difficult to compare it because we don't really design to the baseline. So yeah.
Thank you. We have another hand. So Oriolua, would you like to?
Yeah. No, I think yeah, because Penelope mentioned sustainability in the day-to-day, but then you've also mentioned in your presentation about like the SDGs. So I was wondering if there's any like in particular that you kind of that you find particularly
useful.
I don't know, yeah, kind of relevant and significant to your own practice in the day-to-day.
Yeah, I think we've created our own, which is yeah, we've created our own, and that's been a mix of so many, because one of the questions we had was with changing policy, with changing standards, and so we've had to create our own. And on our website we have a page dedicated to sustainability. So we have a sustainability page where we pick up green infrastructure. I feel like I'm going to have to quickly pull it up and I'll let you know what ours includes, because again, that's our. Oh, thank you. That was very good. Someone's got that up, because that's as standard. We go through this process with all our schemes, and I'm just going to pull it up real quickly. So we look at, of course, energy efficiency, as we've just spoken about. So where we're talking about embodied carbon and operational energy, we look at renewable energy where that's appropriate and useful. So using heat pumps wherever that's where the opportunity arises. We look at incorporating sustainable movements. So whether that be EV charging, or whether that could be something quite fun, as we've specified some electricity generating pavements, for example. So really encouraging people to walk and knowing that they are generating electricity while they walk around. This was for example, Pearly, working with Croydon Council, generating electricity while they walk around, but also knowing that could come back to benefiting them, whether that be in reduced council tax, for example, looking at different opportunities for incentives, water efficiency, of course, biodiversity and green infrastructure. So we follow this as a process for every project. Now, not all will be relevant to the same degree each time, but this is our way of ensuring that we have a standard that we're working to as a GDS standard, if you like. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, so you sort of with the with that goal in mind, like it's like you use it as, yeah, it's like the purpose is to like look to the future, like because you mentioned the electricity and electric pavements,
yeah.
But then yeah, I think it's not just symbolic statements, which that can easily be the trap. But yeah, thanks.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Thank you.
So we have no more questions. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Alex, I think it's Darren here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think we should bring things to a close as it's 6:30, as we've absolutely bombarded Tara with all these amazing questions, all this response to this fantastic presentation. So I would just like to thank Tara for her wonderful presentation. I'd like to thank Alex, Joe and Chloe for setting up this evening. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening and for all the wonderful questions. And if we could just say a big thank you to Tara. Just to mention that the lecture series continues on the 2nd of March, where we've got Zoe Bierman from Studio B and Troy Hodgson from Dark Studio. And Chloe has put up Tara's website for everybody to follow. Thank you very much, Tara.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Really appreciate being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.